Welcome back to the Warrior Servant Leader podcast. We are so glad you're joining us today because this is where we talk about real leadership, real stories, and real solutions, and no excuses are allowed. What do you do when logic alone is not enough to guide you through the tough challenges and choices you face in everyday life? Well, today's guest, Ellen McGinnis, has changed careers 2.5 times, married in a divorce, reimagined what motherhood looks like, and moved across 5 U.S. states and 2 countries. Every single one of those transitions required her to stop, get quiet, and trust something deeper than logic, because logic alone wasn't enough to guide her. Over 20 years of doing that work, personally and professionally, she began to see a pattern that the people who navigate change with the most grace aren't always the ones with the best plans. They're the ones who've learned to listen inward. So she began the hard work of helping herself and others gain clarity in their lives. That work, lived experience, and thousands of conversations became the foundation for the approach she created, one she now uses to help anyone ready to stop outsourcing their direction and start living from the inside out, or as she likes to call it, living your jam. That's what she teaches. It's what her book, her own podcasts, and workshops are built on. She is living her jam and wants you to live yours. Ellen, welcome to the Warrior Servant Leader podcast. This is going to be a fun, exciting conversation. So thanks for being here.
Thanks for that great introduction, Pat. I appreciate it, and I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. All right. So I said this to you before we went on the air, that that listening inward, my first rabbit chasing, squirrel chasing thought was, ooh, I hear voices in my head. What are people going to say about me? What does it mean to listen inwardly?
It is a great place to start. I think it's really, I talk about our intuition, but I think it's more than that. I think everybody can relate to having a voice or an inner knowing that it's the one that tells us what's right from wrong. We know that voice, right? It's sort of the fundamental tenets of a lot of religions and teachings out there is about what is best for us and also how to be a good person. And so there's an inner voice. I do think it's intuition, which I believe is the soul's language. I have a belief that we are souls in human body, in human form. And the soul is the signature of the divine, whatever your God is. I think if it's a benevolent God, then that would be the God that I would ascribe to. So listening inward is not listening to what society says. It says what's best for you. And I think that's hard for many of us because we have to get quiet. And in today's world, it's a very busy, externally oriented world. So listening inward is listening to that voice, but the voice is much more quiet than the ego and the logical mind. That's kind of the challenge for us.
Yeah. And I can't remember. I know it's in the Old Testament. I want to say it was a prophet. I want to say it was Isaiah, but I may be wrong. He was led to a cave and told to listen for God. And there were strong winds, there was fire, there was this, there was that. And then it was in a quiet breeze that he goes, oh my God, that's God. And that's how I kind of picture it, because there's research out there. We have 80,000 thoughts a day, 50,000 of them are negative. And, how do we, and what's your lived experience on this? Because of a lot of the roller coaster ride you've had in life so far, how do you distinguish between that, those thoughts, that inward, if you're listening to what's going on in your head, how do you distinguish the ones that are meant to enhance your life as opposed to those 50,000 negative?
Yeah, it's a great question. First of all, I love whether it's Isaiah or not, I love the example of going into the cave and I mean, it's a great metaphor for all the distractions in life, right? Those are the natural elements that you described, the wind, the rain, whatever it was. But there's lots of distractions. And then how do we go inward? I think children know this, and I think as we get trained in this society, and just go through life and our education and then some of the formal structures of religion can kind of take away our own knowing, right? So the difference between hearing your inner voice and hearing maybe the logical mind is that the logical mind will probably repeat something you already know. And we do need our logical mind to analyze, to make decisions for us, to process information. But really much of the work is when you're listening inward doesn't require that. And this has been proven. There's been a lot of research in the brain about where we need to use it and when we don't. When we meditate, we're in a theta wave state. So I would say the difference is if it's something you've heard a million times, and it sounds really super loud, it's probably your logical mind. If it sounds analytical, if it sounds something like the ego, which wants to keep us safe, wants to keep us in our identity, and wants to keep our belief system in place, then it's probably our logical mind. In my experience, and people have different ways of hearing intuition. There's different senses. So some people do hear a sound. Some people it's just a knowing. There's different, they call them clair senses. And I'm not an expert in those, but sometimes people hear things. Sometimes I have knowing often. And then, or sometimes an idea or an insight will come in and it's not something that I have entertained before. So I can give an example. When I was living on an island outside of Seattle, you mentioned I was going through a divorce, and my ex-husband and I did a really good job of keeping it amicable and really trying to be respectful to everybody. It's a very difficult time. And while I was on this island, I had this insight to move somewhere else. And everything in me was like, no, I don't want to do that. I absolutely don't want to do it. But I took a look at it because it was not an idea that I had. And it also didn't feel whimsical. It felt like it was potentially the right thing, but my ego was like, no, 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 no. So I sat with it like for 3 or 4 months and kind of then started looking at it then using my analytical mind. And what it turned out, it was the best choice for me. And I don't know that I would have thought it on my own. So that's when I hear it. I also meditate, and this is like prayer. I mean, a lot of people, the Buddhists, like when you have insights when we're quiet, when we quiet that part of our mind. So I would say it's soft, it's a knowing, and it feels different than how do I solve this problem and what should I make for dinner?
Yeah. Now that's great. I love that analogy because I think so often, what is it? And I'm paraphrasing. I always get his name wrong. Maslow.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Hierarchy. That breaks down to safety, security, prosperity, and control. And I think we get so caught up in focusing on the what ifs and how can I protect safety, security, prosperity, control, and we lose focus of that quiet time. And like you say, for some people, I was headed to the priesthood at one time, and I was very in tune to contemplative prayer. And it was in that I realized it was me that wanted to be a priest. It wasn't a calling or a vocation that God, there's the scripture of Jeremiah that, I knew you before you were born, and I consecrated you before, I knew you before you were conceived in your mother's womb, and I consecrated you for a purpose before you were born. And that's part of our, in a way, sometimes struggle, but it's part of our journey as discovering what are those gifts and talents and purposes that God has created me and you specifically for. What what are some of the things that in your journey through a lot of challenges and obstacles, what has worked for you that a listener could go, oh, I could do that, or I never thought of doing that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So as you know, I've worked with leaders and their teams for the past 20, almost 25 years. So in organizations, helping them align to their goals and helping them to kind of get the best out of people and create an environment where people can be productive in a healthy way. And so I use a lot of this inside out. I have used a lot of this inside out in that model and that work that I've done. Um, and so often I said, "What do you really want?" To people. And then I'll just keep asking, "But what do you want to have happen?" But people are like, "Well, I can't do that," or "No, no, no, because we have to make profits," or whatever it is. So I think the question is, how does somebody really get clear? So I have like a 5 minute breath techniques where you just sort of clear your mind, and at the end of it you ask a question and just sit with it. And so there's lots out there. Part of the challenge we have is we have to calm our nervous system. I think most of us operate, we're kind of always going. And so when you can get yourself centered, then you can do some quick meditation. You could even do prayer, because I think that, like even in the Christian tradition, rosary, there's this repetition in it that really shuts down the brain. And then you can ask a question. On my website, I do have a 5 minute, I call it a soul check-in. And so it is and we can give people the link to it, but what it really is it's learning how to quiet the mind and reconnect with yourself. For me, and I don't know about you, Pat, but when I'm doing that, and sometimes people can talk about this with prayer too, there's a connection that I feel to everyone and everything that feels so sacred and beautiful. I mean, it's just, and then in that place, I feel, my heart is open. And so I always say, if you're okay, so you could do some breathing techniques to ground yourself. You can ask a question like, what do I need now most? Or what am I afraid of most? I've asked many leaders about this. What are you afraid of right now? Because usually to your point, we're strategizing Maslow's hierarchy, how to make that not happen. If we said, I'm worried about, whatever the security, whatever the fear is, then we can work with that, right? And then we can kind of get clear on what's beneath it. So I think getting quiet is really important. I think asking really basic, tough questions that nobody wants to, that aren't fun necessarily to answer. So I think what I want to share is that a lot of the techniques that I used with leaders, I also used with myself. And then I've had so many transitions that I just got good at them and it even created more. And then I'm like, there's another way of living here that doesn't look as frenetic. And that's what Live Your Jam is all about. The other thing I will say is, I think nature is we know this, it's an automatic nervous system regulator. So if you go out and sit in nature, I think you can get those answers much more quickly. If you did that 5 minute meditation in nature, I think that you'll see good results. The other irony, and I'm going to point this out, is you can't try. That's I'm saying 5 minutes, you're going to get an answer. The truth is you might have to do that, practice being quiet quite a bit, and then nothing comes. Like that's part of the deal is, you just don't start working out and then in 5 minutes you're awesome.
Yeah.
I do think patience is required.
Yeah. And distinguish it, if you will, because here's how my mind, when I first heard about contemplative prayer and started practicing it, is it was difficult because I could not differentiate between being meditative and contemplative and just flat out zoning out, or that you develop your routine, you're busy at work, you have a stressful job and whatnot, and you come home to your spouse and your kids and you just plop down on the couch and you just want to be left alone and have quiet time. But that quiet time, your mind is still racing at 100 miles an hour of what you didn't get done and all that kind of stuff. Are there any recommendations you could make to how to take this time, and even if it is only a few minutes, that to make it productive, as opposed to checking off a box on, oh, my coach or mentor told me to have quiet time?
No, it's a great question because most of the people I work with, it's like I feel a little reticent because I don't want to give them something else to do, right? It's like after I had kids and stuff, and people are like, you're just exhausted, and mine were 14 months apart, and then people are like, well, if you just exercise more, you'd feel better. I'm like, oh yeah, like that kind of stuff. Like we don't need any more to do. So I think that's such a great question, and I always feel for people around that. I think the more you can regulate, so if you're coming home from work and your mind is still racing, I always say like transition. So go up to your room and do 5 minutes of meditation and just training your mind to clear your mind, and then come back down into your family with intention. Because if we keep moving through our day at this high pace, and we don't have transitions for what is to come next, I think it can get blurry. So even myself, sometimes when I'm, I usually meditate in the morning, and I don't meditate that long. This is the beauty of it now, because I remember when I first started meditating, and a lot of the Buddhist stuff, I'm like, wow, I have to go away for 3 days, like a lot. But as we know with prayer, and you can really start out and do it. So I would say to the person who has had a long, busy day at work to come home and cleanse themselves with a meditation and say, I release all of this, and now I move to, when the thoughts come in, just move them. Thoughts come in, just move them. But then start it with intention. I want to go back to my family with love, presence, and an open heart. And I think with more practice over that, people notice results. The problem is that we have to do some of these things in order to see the change. And I feel for people who are busy, and gas prices. I mean, seriously, like I'm out. It's a rat race out there. I mean, it can feel like that, right? And people are working very, very hard all over. So, but I do think to recognize that this is really important, because the more we do this, the more we're going to get to listen to ourselves, connect to the divine within, and also have a deeper connection with ourselves. And then we start making better decisions. We do. It's inevitable.
That's great. And where my mind races to as you're sharing is I learned to multi-stack because of, I don't know what the word would be. I'm an A-type personality, high driver kind of deal. So there's always that opportunity for burnout, or that threat of burnout. And now I'm retired. I wish I'd done this when I was actually working as a cop. But now what you're talking about of getting that centered and getting kind of focused in a positive mindset is we got a German Shepherd Husky, like 95 pounds. And I take him out almost same time every morning, and pop in my AirPods, put on an app. It's a rosary app. And it's about a 20-minute walk with my dog. And it's called the Chaplet to St. Michael the Archangel. And it's very progressive and it's just Hail Marys and Our Fathers, but there's a little bit, you're praying for specific things like obedience and clarity and charity and different things. But that's become my routine. And I have my dog to thank that his routine is about that time. It's like, Dad, I need to go out, because I get him up he gets me up at 5 or 5:30, and I feed him and all that. Well, by 8 o'clock, he's like ready to, hey, I got to go. Literally, I got to go. and let's go take a walk, and there's a field nearby that he can haul butt and run around in. And I've learned that I'm not having to carve out some new time to do something that is beneficial for me spiritually, physically, psychologically, all those things. So if people can find how they can stack, and if it is going to and from work, turn off Fox News on your radio. When I was a street cop working midnights, because we ran call to call, and I'm just crazy, life for 13 years on midnights. I found a classical music station, and that just helped keep me not going down those rabbit holes of calls for service kind of stuff. So I mean, do you have stuff? I mean, are there some of those habits that you developed over time? You go, man, I found this is worked, and it's not work because
It's a
I'm
habit.
not. Yeah,
Yeah, no, and you're and also noticing what you're feeling. Yeah, no, exactly. I love you doing your walk with your dog and connecting in your morning because I mean, that's an example of something that you do that's now a part of your life, so you don't have to carve out time. But yeah, no, I do. I travel a fair bit, and I find myself on airplanes. Like I'm human, and sometimes I'm like, oh, like, oh, I don't want to sit by them, or they're hitting me in the back, or whatever it is, or we're waiting in line, and somebody's pushing ahead. So I find myself having these thoughts sometimes that I'm not particularly proud of. I don't shame myself for them. But what I try to do then I'll do a 5-minute meditation on the plane. I do ground myself and kind of put I imagine a bubble of protection around me because there's people all over and there's energy all over. And so I'm just sort of like, imagine like a little spiritual white light, around me to protect myself. And then I start to do my meditation. And one of the things that I do there is I say to myself, we're all souls and we're all children of God. And please let me
hmm,
connect with that versus I don't want to be next to the person who's breathing heavy, or whatever it is. And that helps me a lot. So anytime that I feel, I mean, I have my morning practice that I do just like you do. That is a part of my routine now. I am older and I have more control. My children are older. When I was younger with my kids and I was working all the time, it was much harder. So
yeah,
I empathize. Like I said, I have a lot of clients where it's like, oh, they're already getting up at 5 and going hard all day, getting their workouts in. But I do think if you can do these 5-minute pieces throughout your day, anytime you find yourself disconnected. And what I said before is really important. I find myself then I can connect back into myself. And I believe that, if that's really my heart and nothing bad ever comes from the heart, And so there's this way that if you did that after work and every time you walked in the door, you took 5 minutes out to kind of cleanse yourself and then set your attention for your family time, you'll notice a difference. So I think people have to start to adopt it. And like your classical music is a great example of you just being like, I need to reset because this is really frenetic. It's also stressful. I'm helping people, but your first responder help, like that's tough. That's like all nervous system is ready to go. You're definitely in fight mode there, right? Because you're going to
yeah,
help people. And we can't sustain that for too long. And we need that work, but it's not, that's external work. It's outwardly facing. It's not internal work. I always feel for firemen because talk about being direct. It's like you never saw a fireman walk into a building and say, "Oh, I think it's kind of getting kind of smoky. We should probably, like everybody just follow me." Like it's a directive,
yeah,
like stop, like get out of here, and I'm going to help you do it. So I think the inside work is quiet time, really.
yeah. Well, we would teach cops that when you're responding to a call, you get a priority one, lights and siren. Crash with injuries, shooting, you name it. But you had to get there quickly and safely. What we would drill into them in the police academy, because they have nothing to relate this to in their life experience. If they've never been a cop, is you know your heart rate's going to go up and all sorts of things are going to happen. Is so here's what you should be doing as you're responding. Play it in your head in advance. When am I going to turn my siren off? When am I going to turn my lights off so I can approach, inconspicuously or whatever? Am I going to go to the front of the house or the back of the house, and talk to your partner, and you're role playing it in your head so that it becomes almost instinctive and you don't have to think about it. I think what you're talking about is the exact same thing, is that when you're at work, you're planning, okay, I get off at 5 o'clock, and at 4:30, you are visualizing how that drive home is going to be, what you're going to do when you get home for that 5-minute cleanse. And then it becomes natural and almost second nature, and you become more situationally aware of what's going on around you.
100%. I mean, what you're talking about is being intentional.
Yeah.
And that is when the mind can be our ally, right? When we can use the mind to help us. When we're checked out or we're just kind of running through our day, which happens to all of us all the time, that is when it'll just keep racing. So, and I do think the practice of like what you're talking about is a little bit of mindfulness and intention setting about ahead of time. So we're not in just hyper response mode. We're in kind of more, planful. It's a little bit more thoughtful, and we're probably more aligned and thinking more clearly. So and if you're on your way home, you can be thinking about what is the intention I want to set with my family when I get home. And I always just, whenever I want to drop into my heart, I think of my children. It goes like that. I mean, or I don't have a dog right now, but I imagine I had a dog. It was just, the love is right there. And I think when we can focus our energy there, like think of something that you really love, you'll feel it, you'll feel it in your heart, and then kind of think about what I want to create from there. So, and I mean, these are ways that that we're talking about throughout our day, and how we connect to that inner knowing and that inner wisdom. Sometimes it can just happen before our sleep. A lot of people get things before sleep. You can ask questions before you go to sleep and see what happens in the morning and play with that consistently. Another part, and I talked about nature, but another part of Live Your Jam is really kind of looking at our thoughts too. I mean, we all have conditioning and subconscious thoughts, and really becoming the witness to them, because I think you said 80,000 decisions or thoughts a day, and 50,000 of them are negative. Some people have a stronger inner critic than others, based either on their personality or their environment, what their parents said. It just depends. I work with the Enneagram, which is a really good tool to help people understand their kind of unconscious motivators. So I just want to let people know, when we have a thought, let's just say we have a thought like, oh, use my airplane example. I can take a look at that and be like, instead of feeling shame for the thought that I had, I can be like, oh, I'm noticing that I'm having negative voices coming in about my fellow travelers. What's that all about? And it's like, oh, I really would. And then I'm noticing that, versus, oh, I'm a bad person for having that. I do this. So one of the things that I do then is say, like, what's going on? I realize I'm a little bit stressed right now. I'm worried about being uncomfortable, all of these things. And then I can deal with that. How can I make myself more comfortable? How can I soothe myself versus letting the thoughts take over? So it's just another way that, Eckhart Tolle has The Power of Now is a book that I use. And I've done a lot of research on this. And then also Michael Singer, Untethered Soul, are two really good resources to examine the way that we think. And I want people to know we're not the voice in our head. We are just not.
Yeah. That is so hard for people to wrap their head around and actually accept, because it goes. I'm going to try and say this as gently as possible. It was done to us as kids. We've done it to our own kids. We do it to our grandchildren. Is we start conditioning them to think a certain way when we say this. What do you want to be when you grow up? And that puts so much pressure. And I only know this from in hindsight kind of deal. And I don't know, I'm 5 years old. tomorrow I might want to be, I don't know, a FIFA soccer player because that's what's on TV today. That's what has my attention. But we start conditioning people to start thinking about what do you want to be in something that is so far down the road, and then they start having those self-limiting thoughts. They start feeling like failures because, and then keep filling in the blank. But they think that's normal. We think it's normal to ask that question, and that because you have to plan, for your future and all that kind of stuff. And we don't let our kids be childlike and have fun. Yes, we protect them. Yes, we want them to learn and grow and all those things. But don't start asking them what they want to be when they're 21, 22 years old and they're 6 now. And
that's a great question. I mean, what I try to do in my workshops is let people access what they already know about themselves. I don't feel like we need to know. I love vision boards. I don't feel like anybody needs to create another map and go after another dream. I mean, I think most of us have our answers inside, and most of it comes from, the inner child or that 5-year-old, the things we love to do. I think the better question for children is, what do you love? What are you loving right now? What do you really enjoy? Because ultimately, if we're really listening, we'll probably get back to those threads. Live your jam, in all honesty, started when I was a little girl. I did not know what it was. And it's been such a weird, I didn't know, it may not be called Live Your Jam in 10 years. I don't know, I mean, but I've had this desire to help people understand that we're all in this together, that we have a benevolent being that loves us unconditionally. And part of our job here is to learn to love ourselves unconditionally and get rid of fear. And we can take that in whatever direction we want to go in life. And I think for children, and one of the ways we learn this is by doing what we love. And that seems selfish, it's not self-care, it's following, because therein lies our unique purpose, right? And it doesn't have to be one thing, it can be many. The one thing that I want to say that is so challenging about this for people, and you said it, is like, what do you want to be when you grow up? We're so focused on things taking form because we're a capitalist society. Like, that's like what we want. A lot of my friends are like, can you talk to my kids about this? Like, I'm sorry, the game is they got to get a job and go to work. Like, don't have another structure around right now, right? And they or participate some way in society in a meaningful way, right? And to take care of themselves and be able to support themselves. I don't know, like, that's the game right now. It's when we move on and we get a little bit older, right, that we can look at it and say, and Jung talked about this in terms of individuation. That's when we can say, the ego starts to calm down a little bit, and we can say, why am I really here? And what am I supposed to do in order to express myself to help love others and myself? Yeah. I wish we could teach kids that, and I think we can. I think we can start with these little questions, but we're still structured in this way that can make it difficult.
Especially adults. I think you could actually sit down with the kid and get honest answers to these two questions that we as adults struggle with. What do you have to do, and what do you want to do?
Yep.
There's a distinction, and you can prioritize. Well, I have to be the best at work, and I go, or I have to be number one, or like the worst leadership advice I ever got was, if you want it done right, do it yourself. And so if I ask you, well, what do you have to do? Well, I have to do it myself so the team grows, or we meet our quotas, or we fill in the blank. And then I look at them and go, why do you have to do that? Do you need to do that? And if they go, well, I have to because, then my first reaction is, well, then why don't you just fire all those employees, because you're doing their job for them. Yeah. But if you ask a 5-year-old, what do you have to do today? They'll tell you, and then what do you want to do today. And they can see the difference between the two. But as we get older, I think we lose that clarity, as I think people call it. And we start living up to, by the time you're 15 or 16 years old, you start living up to others' expectations of what you ought to be and what you ought to do. And I'm speaking from experience, because everybody's like, oh, you'll make a great lawyer because you got the gift of gab and this, that, and the other thing. And I go, oh, guess I'll go to law school. So I graduated from, high school at 17, went straight to college, graduated from law school shortly after, or college, graduated from college shortly after I was 21.
Right now we're both Flyers, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Dayton, University of Dayton Flyers. So I went to law school because, well, I guess that's what I'm supposed to do. And then I became a lawyer, and I was practicing law. And my wife one night's like, when I came home, she's like, you hate what you're doing. What do you really want to be doing? And I said, I want to be a cop. And I have since I was like 8 or 9 years old. And I was 28 at this time. She goes, then go do it. Yeah. And I had a 26-year career in it, and it was very fulfilling, but there's a whole bunch of stories that go behind.
I'm sure.
Behind that. Well, not just doing the job, but how I actually defined who I was by what I did.
Oh, yeah. The ego loves that. The ego loves that.
Yeah. And I wish I had read, or he had written it back in the 70s and 80s. Ryan Holiday's Ego is the Enemy. Yeah. I wish I'd had that book. As part of my formation process. Yeah. So tell us more about the book and the I think you mentioned something about you have an online checklist, a soul check-in on your website. Yeah. Tell us the book, the website. What can people actually start going? Okay, I'm going to take that first step. What is that first step?
I think what I say, there's what you talked about this earlier. Soul resonance is a big deal. So sometimes our family system might teach us one thing, but sometimes we hear things in life. We're like, yes, that makes so much sense to me. I call that soul resonance. And like for me as a young child, we talked about this. I grew up, Irish Catholic. I went through to Catholic, university, and so high school and university, and very understand and studied a lot of religions. But I always thought that we were souls in a body. I just did. I just thought that my mother just passed at 97. I see the body there, and I know that the soul is elsewhere, right? And then there can be all different sorts of beliefs on what the soul does afterwards. But I'm not necessarily sure I was taught that. I was taught about, I didn't really believe in hell. I'm sorry, I don't. I just don't think there's a place where bad people go. I think that they get to come back and try it again, and I don't think fear is a great motivator. It can be, but I think I'd rather aspire to being the best me than have the worst me chasing me. So in terms of Live Your Jam, what I've been doing is taking all of these different pieces of what has worked for me and has worked with my clients, and that I really embodied it. I've lived this, and I welcome other people's ideas, but the book is about, it's really a thesis and a practical guide to the 5 different ways that I think that we can begin to live from the inside out. And then there's reflection and questions in there. And so I think it's a brilliant start to saying, we all are in this together. And that if you're somebody who I have leaders that I feel have made it very far in life, and I work with them, and then they're still not satisfied. So I call it, they want more significance and meaning in their life. Anybody who's made it far and has a lot of money will tell you that's probably not the thing that's keeping them happy. So I have a group that's called Success to Significance. I think society, the data's in on this, most societies teach women to be very pleasing. It's not our hormones. We are taught to be pleasing. So I have women who are at the midlife, and usually that's a great time because we've been serving everybody else. So it's like, what do you want to do with your precious time now? Right. A lot of women are, they're doing three things, and something else. So if you have the time, what is it that you want to do? Spiritual seekers, people who know that there's more out there. I think that this is very resonant with. So, and then also high achievers that want more than life's bells and whistles. I have a lot of people that are super high achieving, regardless of their age, regardless of and they're like, there's more out here. So I think those are the people that I appeal to, but I would say more than anything, if any of this of what I'm saying resonates with you, then to explore it, and I have a book, I have a podcast, and I really enjoy helping people do this. I have a workshop that'll come out in September. And this workshop is just for women, but it's about the courage to lead from within. And that is a big thesis around really getting clear on, I don't know, Pat, like if we look back on our life, and you just shared this with, going to law school and then becoming a policeman, there's some decisions that we made from our own authority, right? That we're like, this is like what my soul wants. And there's some that we made, but we're pleasing. I take people through a journey of like, we do what I call a power audit, and we do a relationship timeline where it's like all these key decisions in my life. What was the driving factor in that? And that's not for shame. It's just for looking at, okay, like I've made a lot of decisions that I think I was trying to please some other people.
Yeah.
So what is it in me, getting back to that child, if you will, because I think that child has a lot of the answers. What is it in me that I want, that's already within me, that I want to express?
And you used the word earlier you used the word avoid. And I think that's one of the biggest traps that we fall into as adults is we want to avoid conflict. And then you have to ask yourself why. What's the fear? Are you fear of failing? Or people go, well, I'm an introvert. Well, so is half the world, and the other half is extroverts. That's just a trait. But I was writing down a couple of notes. One for the from the women perspective. The first person I always think about who was a warrior, who was a servant, who was a leader, and everybody in the world knows this woman, and she's actually now a saint in the Catholic Church, is if you want an example of what this looks like from your listening inward, is just study St. Teresa of Calcutta. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you know her story, you know her background, her bio, whatever you want to call it, and then listen to her speech at the United Nations, and some of her writings is the epitome in my lifetime of a person who was a genuine, true warrior servant leader. And she did not have to take that route in life. Yeah. And you talked about, success versus significance, that people would look at St. Teresa and go, if you go, hey, do you think she was probably the most successful woman in the world? And you'd go, no. She lived in Calcutta, and you have all these worldly, but then flip it and go, do you think she's one of the most significant women in the world? Yeah. Yes. Yeah. For totally different reasons. Yeah. But the one thing, and I do this in training, and I tell people, I ask them to write it down, write down 3 goals you're going to achieve in the next 90 days and how you're going to celebrate those achievements, even if nobody else knew what you were doing. I don't care. I don't care what it is. Lose 25 pounds, run your first marathon, study for that promotion exam. I don't care, whatever it is. Set 3 goals. What are you going to do to celebrate achieving that? Because giving ourselves a pat on the back, I think, is important. But then I tell them to write this down. If your funeral was tomorrow, what would people say about you in one sentence? Mm-hmm. Now write down, what do you want them to say?
Mm-hmm.
And now write down, what are you not doing to live that sentence? That gives you that perspective of wants and needs. And it gives you a foundation, I think, of moving forward to live your jam. Because I want people at my funeral not to be crying and this, that, and the other thing, but celebrating the life that I touched, it impacted, in whatever little bit of time I had with them. The retreat
Yeah.
for women.
Yeah.
Where, how can women
So
that are
it's
listeners?
all on my website, but that will be in September. It's going to be live, but virtual, the first one.
Okay.
And so it's my inaugural cohort one, and it's all on my Live Your Jam website, and people can sign up. And the goal was to do it then for a weekend live places. I'm still, so I'm excited about that because I love, my background, my graduate work was in organizational psychology. So I love to get in a room of people and kind of work things out. I love to roll up my sleeve. And that was even when I was a little girl, I had this, like I said, I had this idea. And when people say, what do you want to do? And I was like, I want to take people to lunch and make them feel better. I didn't have the words for it.
Yeah.
And it was always, and there was times in my life where that, whatever this was, that feeling was gone. It was completely gone. But I was like, I remember, if you think back and I remember I loved this, and what really was it? And it's taken all these years. So I would say there's no wrong turns in life. There are all of the lessons that we get are really, I hate to say this but the lesson is the blessing. I mean, it doesn't feel that way when you're going through it. It certainly doesn't. And I've had and sat with people, and I know people have had to go through unspeakable tragedies. The truth is, though, if we are living from the inside out, we can even see the silver linings in those. We can see how it's made us more compassionate, how it's changed our lives. And no, we wouldn't want to go through it again. And some of us might not want that thing to happen. But if you believe that we're all souls and we all have come here for a reason, it gets more palatable and more beautiful, So I want to, I don't think there's any wrong turns. There's only turns that, we get to learn from. And hopefully, as Maya Angelou said, when you know better, you do better, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And as you put that about no wrong turns and whatnot, the first thing that came to mind was look at Saul before he became Paul. And, and look at the life he led, which was horrific, including being there at the stoning of Stephen. And then he had his aha moment, if you will, or encounter with God, with Christ, and that whole, what are you doing with your life? And then he came through that, and then read everything about Paul and how it was he ran the good race and the journey, even though he spent I don't know how many times in prison. Most of his letters were written from prison, but he was filled with joy and with the contentment of knowing what it was all done for. And I think that's what you're talking, that inward reflection. We're so busy that we don't take the time to have those reflections and be able to go, man, I can step outside. We live on 5 acres and I'm 3 miles from the Front Range. So we're surrounded by beauty and deer and turkey and bears and all that kind of stuff, that I try to make sure I don't become accustomed to that.
It was the same. I'm like, I hope I never, and there's so much beauty around. I hope this never isn't awesome, because it is. I just was down the California coast and I turned to the ocean and I burst out into tears right as the road went down the one. There's so much beauty.
Yeah.
Everywhere. And even in the plain things. I'm with you. I'm sorry I interrupted. But yeah,
no,
I hope that we do and I think connecting to yourself allows that we take the time to notice things more. If we could just slow ourselves down, and that's what I can promise people. If we can learn how to get quiet, even if it's, 5 minutes a day and then 10 minutes, 5 minute times, I think the vistas and the beauty that we can enjoy, it's the connection to ourself, and then we really can feel their love and connection to the divine, and by extension, we begin to feel it with everybody else too, and I don't it's simple, it's sweet, and there's no fireworks in this stuff. It's just, um, almost a gentle peace and joy, and that's I think maybe potentially with, all the media coming in, all the negative stuff that we kinda, like, I noticed on social media, a lot of people put something controversial up to get a response from
Yeah.
people,
Yeah.
and I just don't I mean, I don't wanna participate in that, I don't want and nothing no judgment, but I'd rather us be quietly called to something than be, have our flight or fight, kinda go off.
Yeah. It's well, we're both raised Irish Catholic, and not in the South, but I had some great aunts that lived in New Orleans, and I learned the expression that if you did something really stupid or said something really stupid to one of my great aunts, if they said to you, "Oh, bless your sweetheart," that was not a compliment. And, as opposed to, going off the handle or going, "What the hell are you thinking?" And, and whatnot. And bless your sweetheart. The and one of the things, and this is, I only learned this within the last couple of years. I got certified to train law enforcement on interacting with folks with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and like when you encounter someone that's in a meltdown, a full blown meltdown, or is spiraling out of control, we so want to take control that that change in mindset that is going to completely change the outcome of your encounter with this person is time and distance are your friend.
Yep. Really good.
And that you don't have to solve everybody's problems. And if you take that time and distance and you're not going hands-on, you're not giving commands, what you end up finding out is you become a better listener. You become more observant of, what is triggering this person. And the box breathing, combat breathing, we actually train cops. If you do that with the person that is spiraling, they're going to mimic.
Yeah.
They're going to calm down because you're calming down.
Right.
And it shouldn't take a potentially violent encounter in your life to learn these lessons of how important it is to the self-awareness.
Yeah.
And I don't mean egotistically,
No.
but your self-awareness of what triggers you. I used to yell at people and lay on the horn, and it's like, my wife's like, you think they really heard what you were saying?
Yeah.
And so now it happened yesterday on the way to church. Somebody I'm doing 5 miles over the speed limit, and somebody blows past me on a double yellow line to pass me. And normally I would lay on the horn or maybe have some sign language going. And instead I have taught myself to go, I hope everything's okay because there must be an emergency somewhere for them.
Right.
Yeah,
No,
I don't believe that.
Bless your soul. Bless their soul.
Yeah. Bless your sweet little heart. But I don't let them jack. It's not even them jacking me up. I'm letting myself get angry about something that's not within my control. And quite frankly, who gives a crap? Now, silently, I think, man, I hope there's a cop up there running radar. But, why get upset about something that is so inconsequential in the immediate, let alone the big picture.
Yeah, really. I mean, those are some of the things that we learn in this work, and it's great because it's, you're not going to let people steal your peace. It doesn't mean we look away all the time, and it doesn't mean
Yeah,
we give up our values. It means that we, in that case, I can't do anything about it. I'm not gonna, I get it. Like I I use my time and my energy for ways I can help. And if it's outside of that and it's a distraction, I have boundaries. I'm a strong woman. I don't let people walk over me. But in the case that that's just good awareness.
yeah, and yeah, even David in the Old Testament, yeah, he could kick ass and take names and you know be a badass fighter, but he wrote half the Psalms
Yeah.
in the Old Testament. So if you read the Psalms, that his conversations with God and and then he did some immoral kind of things too. But if you look at it, it's like we're not asking you to be perfect in this life because we'll never achieve that. But we can all do a lot better than we're currently doing. You ought to write this book down if you haven't already read it. It's a real easy read. I'm just about halfway through it. I think it's only like 39, 40 pages. And it's taken me like 5 days just to get halfway through because I'm taking so many notes. But it's called Brother Lawrence.
Brother Lawrence. Okay.
Lawrence,
Okay.
and it's written by it's from 1666
Oh my.
to I think 1680 is the time period, but it's the author's 4 conversations with Brother Lawrence and then 14 letters from Brother Lawrence. Why he's not a saint, and because he's a real person. This is not a fictional thing. His real name isn't even Lawrence. That's the name he took in the. He was not a priest, and I think he was Benedictine. But it is incredible the insights that this guy, and he apparently was really, really tall and clumsy, and maybe even had some physical disabilities. But his writings and his, I don't know what it's called. Would you would read this and go, hey, the dude's living his jam. It's such an incredible, eye-opening, very simple. Life is not that complicated if you have your priorities. And he had one priority. Everything is from the lens of my love of God.
Yeah. Lovely. Yeah.
And so everything. So he talks about, if I slacked off and I wasn't thinking about God, or I didn't take something to God in prayer or whatever, I tell God, hey, dude, I'm sorry. I don't beat myself up, and I try not to do it again.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the key, because I talk about energy in the book, and I mean, there's things that are low vibration like that. And I mean that we've been around people that drain us, right? We've been in situations that drain us. If you find yourself listening to news streams that are negative, that you're gonna, it's harder than to, because anyway, you're creating those neural pathways, right? That are negative. So it's harder to rewire the brain if we're always doing negative things. But there's an energetic, quality to all of this, and people who or lift us up, we can feel it,
Yeah.
And so I think shame, to your point about Brother Lawrence, is like you acknowledge it and you try to do better.
Yeah.
And because shame doesn't keep us anywhere, other than stuck, and it's
Yeah.
very low vibe. So I talk about that too, of noticing, what being in nature, being with animals, prayer, meditation, mindfulness, these are all high vibe things. So we
Yeah.
have control over our lives. The food that we eat, and I'm not trying to get super healthy, but if you eat a bunch of junk food, you're not going to feel great. It's
Yeah.
just true. So what are the ways that we can show love to ourselves? And it makes this work easier.
Yeah. Man, this is awesome. And I think one of the best examples of that is Christ told Peter, "You're going to deny me 3 times." Peter, no way, not going to happen. And it happens. And he, runs off and is so remorseful and whatnot. But he didn't let that define himself or define his relationship with Christ. And then we know the rest of the story. He becomes, the founder of the Catholic Church, more or less. Is that whole, what you're talking about, of that inward listening, is so incredible and so real if you will just take the time to recognize it and then grow with it. It's kind of like when you're an infant, you don't understand what your parents are saying. You don't speak English, and you don't, nothing. But you grow with it in time, and it takes a number of years. So it's not like I've seen it happen. We had a mama deer birth a fawn on the side of our property here, and it didn't take all that long. I wasn't counting the time. That fawn got up and they got moving because you don't want a predator coming. Well, we don't have that experience. We do learn by failure. Yeah. How many times when you want your kid to walk, they got to, it's a process. And I think what you're talking about of the inward listening is a process, and don't get discouraged when you feel like you failed.
Absolutely. And there's many ways we can access it. So I encourage people to explore all the different ways. I talked about nature, meditation. I think getting quiet, intention when you get home. There's lots of different things that we can do. I talk about, you're using story from the Bible. There's lots of very inspirational people that I went through tough times, and I would read about Egyptian gods and goddesses, and a lot of there's lots of different, that's not in the book particularly, but there's lots of different things that we talked about. Teresa of Calcutta. It's really important. There are people out there that emulate and we admire for a reason. And our job isn't necessarily to be them, it's to be inspired by them, because we carry the same abilities as they do.
Yeah.
So good.
That's man.
Yeah, fun conversations for fellow flyer.
Yeah, this is fun, and I've taken a ton of notes and stuff, and I'm just thinking, like, this will be my last thought. When Christ sent out the 72 disciples, not the 12 apostles, sent the 72 disciples out 2 by 2, and they came back and they were so excited and talked about all the things that they did, including healing people, casting out demons, raising the dead. Is Christ wasn't there holding their hand, doing their job for them. He gave them authority. He gave them skills and talents and gifts. And where it was rooted was in God the Father, and he sent them out, and what do they call it? The lived experience confirmed for them the truth of what Christ had taught them and what he told them they could do. And I think what you're talking about is exactly that same principle. Is it's going to be a learned, lived experience, and it's going to be real. You just got to be patient.
Yeah, and you got to hang in there. Yeah, no, there's beauty in all of it, and there's sad times too. This isn't a bypass. You don't.
Oh yeah.
Human experience. It's a school here, and our job is to learn how to love each other and ourselves and access the divine within. So I think we need what really excites me about this work is when one of us begins to change, all of us begin to change because we're connected. So it's the larger goal of Live Your Gem. I want people to listen inward because I know that they have better answers than are out there in society, and then they can use those answers to kind of work with the external. They can use their internal answers to work with what's available to us outside versus the other way around, right?
Yeah.
But every time we do this work, we all get better. And, that's the end game. I want to make an impact in helping all of us see the beauty in each other.
That's awesome. It reminds me of the African proverb, it takes a village to raise a child. And that's what you're talking about, building that community and literally being community, not just a number on a population chart.
Absolutely. And that's what all of the biggest religious traditions teach, is about how we love each other, love ourselves, and love the divine.
Yeah.
Whatever your God is. Yeah.
Wow.
All right.
What a lot of fun, man. Thank you so much. And you're the first fellow flyer I've had.
It's an honor.
So every podcast I'm looking for, is this a first? And this is a first, an alma mater guest on the show. And man, you have such great insights. Folks, I'm going to repeat it, liveyourjam.com. You got to visit that. Check it out. Check out for ladies out there listening. Check out the seminar, the online seminar in September. Get signed up for that. Man, Ellen, thank you for being here. This was awesome. To our loyal listeners, because of you, we're in 75 countries now. Keep liking, commenting, sharing with your friends who need to hear the messages of these great guests. Be sure to follow us on YouTube, warriorservantleaderpodcast.com. Everything Pat Welsh is at Pat Welsh JD, Instagram, LinkedIn, all that kind of stuff. Check us out. Check out our books. And please, 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 always, always strive to do the right things at the right time, the right way, and for the right reasons, because that's what that's what warriors, servants, and leaders do every day, every time. Love you all, and see you next week.